The Marvel Universe is home to some of the most iconic characters in all of pop culture. From the Avengers, Spider-Man, the X-Men and beyond, Marvel's superhero roster are among some of the most well-known in the entire world. Ever since the universe's expansion in the 1960s, thanks to the work of Stan Lee, Jack Kirby, Steve Ditko and others, this world outside our window has become a firm staple of the modern entertainment landscape and enthralled audiences for decades. In the mid to late 1990s though, Marvel suddenly found itself in trouble, and in an attempt to climb out of bankruptcy and safeguard its future, the company actually licensed 4 of its long-running characters over to a cutting-edge independent publisher. This collaboration aimed to revitalise the 4 titles, Daredevil, The Punisher, Black Panther and The Inhumans, by allowing the creative teams to push the envelope with what is expected from superhero storytelling, resulting in darker, more nuanced and introspective stories with less focus on continuity and fitting into the grander tale of Marvel's universe. Beginning in 1998, these books, known collectively as Marvel Knights, breathed new life into the company, regaining interest in 4 heroes whose popularity had slumped and bringing through a whole new generation of writers and artists that would redefine superhero comics for the next decade. The story of Marvel Knights is one of the most significant and intriguing tales in the history of superhero comics. Not only is it responsible for bringing readers back to Marvel's books at their darkest hour, but it set a new precedent for how these stories should be told going forward. And in this video, I want to explain the history behind Marvel Knights, discuss the factors that led to its creation, and how Event Comics under Joe Quesada and Jimmy Palmiotti were able to revolutionize 4 overlooked pillars of the Marvel Universe, and how this imprint over the next 10 years changed the very face of superhero storytelling and the Marvel Comics universe, leaving a lasting legacy that can still very much be felt within the printed page today. Before we continue though, just a quick reminder to leave a like on this video if you enjoy it, and subscribe to Owen Likes Comics so you don't miss out on any future videos. In order to understand the significance of Marvel Knights, it's first important to explain how this ambitious imprint first came to be. In December 1996, Marvel Entertainment filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy, partly caused by the crash of the speculator bubble, leaving Marvel with an excess of unsold comics worldwide, and the ill-fated purchase of distributor Heroes World. The company quickly found themselves in immense financial trouble. In the months after their bankruptcy was announced, cuts were widespread throughout Marvel, both towards its staff and its monthly release of comics, as the fate of the company started back in 1939 seemingly hung in the balance. Whilst Marvel did eventually survive their bankruptcy scare, coming out 2 years later following a merger with Toy Biz, it's in the aftermath of this financial calamity that the building blocks of Marvel Knights would first appear. You see, whilst Marvel was struggling throughout much of the mid to late 1990s, another smaller independent company was finding great success in this period. Event Comics was an independent publisher founded in 1994 by the team of Jimmy Palmiotti and Joe Quesada. Having met whilst working together over at Valiant Comics, both were rising names in the industry, with Palmiotti gaining attention for his ability as both a writer and an inker over at Marvel, while Quesada had rose through the ranks at DC, culminating in the creation of Azrael alongside Denny O'Neil. As such, Event was launched as a place for Quesada and Palmiotti to develop original, wholly independent titles. Event's rise to prominence over the next 4 years was thanks to their flagship character Ash, alongside other notable titles like Painkiller Jane and 22 Brides. Event's success hadn't gone unnoticed though, and with Marvel attempting to regain their foothold in a new look comics landscape, the company approached Quesada and Palmiotti about taking over editorship of several of their less popular heroes, offering full creative control and the ability to handpick the creative teams of these prospective new books. Jimmy Palmiotti explains how these conversations with Marvel first began, stating that
Marvel was looking to shake things up, to try something new. They were canceling a bunch of books and everything. I went in the initial meeting. It was Joe Calamari telling us how great we did for two guys with event comics, making a lot of noise and getting a lot of exposure. So when we sat down with him, he knew who we were, and we started discussing something like Heroes Reborn. We said, these are the characters we're interested in, we would like to have an office in the building, and we'd like to work with Marvel Editorial. And then they came back with us, you'd have 4 titles, you get bonuses for getting things in on time, here's how much you get per book, so that's how much you have to spend on each team. So that opened up all the conversations where Joe and I started looking around us and seeing the people that we know, and how to bring them in, and what characters would fit them the best.
With this deal agreed, Quesada and Palmiotti decided on the characters they would feature in their new imprint, as well as the writers and artists that they would seek to work with. Immediately, the duo knew they wanted to make Daredevil the feature character of Marvel Knights, with Palmiotti proposing Kevin Smith, a longtime comics fan who had found success writing and directing Clerks and Mallrats, to be its writer. Smith recalls how he was approached to work on Daredevil, explaining that,
"I met Jimmy and Joe by way of Mallrats. I met them when we had a Mallrats screening at the San Diego Comic-Con in 1995. We had a screening at Horton Plaza, a bunch of creators. We were able to recruit a bunch of comic book creators, artists, writers, people we were fans of, to be in the audience. It was huge for a comic book fan. Like, oh my god, we made a movie about the world of comics. We got like Peter David in the audience. Joe Quesada and Jimmy Palmiotti are in the audience. It was massive. I met Jimmy and Joe. I talked to them that night. They were like, look, you've always talked about how you love Frank's run on Daredevil. Why don't you write some comics? Now, this was huge. This was everything. And I said, oh, God, all right. Yeah, that'd be amazing. Let's do this. Oh, fuck yeah, son. And they announced it.
With Smith signed on to write Daredevil and Quesada agreeing to draw the series, the duo next turned their sights over to The Punisher. At this time, the character was actually out of print, following John Ostrander finishing up his run in April 1997, and therefore the two editors were eager to bring the hero into their Marvel Knights brand. They approached the team of Christopher Golden and Tom Sniegoski, two longtime friends who had experience both in comics and writing novels. The pair's pitch for Punisher would be a noticeable departure from any previous run, focusing on Frank Castle's relationship with the supernatural as he's transported into a battle between angels and demons following a suicide attempt. Impressed by this unique pitch, Golden and Sniegoski were hired to write the new Punisher title, with Swamp Thing co-creator Bernie Wrightson picked to draw it. With 2 of their 4 books now in development, Quesada and Palmiotti then turned their attentions to the Inhumans. Although both were keen to include a team book in their imprint, Quesada was the one who pushed for the Inhumans due to their connection to Jack Kirby, and the belief that the team were yet to receive a truly definitive run. The duo first approached artist Jay Lee, who agreed to draw the series under the condition that Paul Jenkins would be hired as writer, having become a fan of his work on Hellblazer. And although Jenkins was initially surprised at the offer, he agreed to write the book, and the duo got to work reimagining the Inhumans. The final of these 4 launch books was Black Panther. When deciding on a creative team, the duo instantly knew who they wanted. Christopher Priest had been a friend of Quesada's for some time and was an experienced name in the industry as both a writer and an editor. Quesada, recalling how Priest came to be involved in Marvel Knights, noted that
Christopher Priest was a Spider-Man editor here for many, many years. But I got to meet Priest in the early 90s when he was editing at DC. He's the guy. He basically hired me sort of off the street. He gave me my very first gig as an editor and changed my life. So I contacted him for Black Panther. I think we had talked about it some time back, but I knew he had a take on it. I think one of the comments was that the Black Panther book, as it's been written over the years, is that so much of it is focused on Wakanda, this fantasy country. And so much of the Marvel universe where it really resonates with people is when it's in the real world. So why don't we do something fun? Why don't we do Coming to America? Let's bring T'Challa here and do the fish out of water thing.
Artist Mark Texeira soon joined Priest, and with this, the creative teams for each of the 4 Marvel Knights books were now decided. Quesada and Palmiotti served as editors for all of these books, overseeing the production of the initial issues throughout much of 1998. And then in November, the very first issue of each of these 4 new series finally hit shelves, and as readers excitedly journeyed into this dark new corner of Marvel's universe, they quickly realised that things were about to change. While these 4 launch titles hit shelves in November 1998, there were some behind-the-scenes concerns about one of these comics not being released on time. You see, although Kevin Smith had signed on to write Daredevil following the release of Mallrats, his time had been divided by the production of his next feature film, Dogma. As Marvel was waiting for Smith to submit drafts, Joe Kelly, who was writing the ongoing Daredevil series at this time, finished his run in March 1998. Not wanting to wait 8 months until the next issue, and with the mounting concern of Smith's commitment, Marvel tasked Scott Lobdell with writing a 4-part story that would act as a bridge between Kelly and Smith's runs. However, problems soon arose as Lobdell's pitch, entitled Flying Blind, was centred around Matt Murdock suddenly regaining his sight, which just so happened to be the same idea that Smith had pitched for his Marvel Knights series. Already behind schedule and now in desperate need of a new idea, Kevin Smith actually quit the book in January 1998, even going as far as to formally announce it on his website. Whilst Marvel did release Lobdell's Flying Blind miniseries, Quesada and Palmiotti were able to convince Smith to rejoin the project, and the writers subsequently devised a new storyline entitled Guardian Devil. Guardian Devil is perhaps the most well-known arc in any of these early Marvel Knights titles. Told over 8 issues, the story chronicles Matt Murdock following a breakup with Karen Page, adopting an infant child left on his doorstep, who many believe to be the Antichrist. Meanwhile, Karen discovers she has contracted HIV, whilst Foggy Nelson is accused of murdering a woman he was having an affair with, who also turns into a demon. It's eventually revealed that all of these events were orchestrated by Mysterio, who is slowly dying of a brain tumour and is seeking to enact one last master plan that will immortalise him. Guardian Devil's climax sees Daredevil outsmart Mysterio, proving that he faked the death of Foggy's partner and Karen's diagnosis. Embarrassed that his final scheme had failed, Mysterio ultimately takes his own life, but not before Bullseye murders Karen Page and leaves a parting gift for the Man Without Fear. Just from this brief description alone, it's clear that Marvel Knights was going to be a far darker and more graphic series than any regular Marvel comic book. Smith and Quesada's story tackles many complex themes and presents a far more morbid tale than what most readers at the time were used to, even for a darker character like Daredevil. The other 3 launch books were not dissimilar. Christopher Priest's run on Black Panther sees T'Challa travel to New York on a diplomatic mission before encountering several high-profile threats to both his life and the future of Wakanda. The first issue opens not in the hero's nation-state, but in a dingy New York apartment, as Everett Ross, a US State Department employee tasked with watching over T'Challa, sits atop his toilet seat, attempting to shoot a rat. This opening page sets the tone for Priest and Mark Texeira's reinvention of Black Panther. Not only did this series introduce new characters like the Dora Milaje and the villainous Achebe, but it also reintroduced classic Black Panther foes, most notably Eric Killmonger, who, after attempting to destroy Wakanda's economy, stages a coup and attempts to claim the mantle of Black Panther for himself. Likewise, Paul Jenkins and Jay Lee's Inhuman series proved a far more nuanced look at the superhero team than ever seen previously. Their 12-issue run focused heavily on the politics of the Inhuman Society and the personal dynamics between the various members of its royal family. Namely, the comic details the feud between Black Bolt and his brother Maximus the Mad, as the latter seeks to take control of Atalan with the help of an army of Portuguese mercenaries. Whereas these 3 launch books were all received very well upon their release, with Guardian Devil becoming one of the most well-known Daredevil stories, Priest Black Panther being a majorly significant reinvention of the hero, and Jenkins' Inhumans quickly becoming an Eisner Award-winning series, the other launch book, Punisher Purgatory, was noticeably less well received. It's worth noting that while the other 3 books were marketed as either a limited series or an ongoing series, with Inhumans running for 12 issues, while both Daredevil and Black Panther ran for over 60, The Punisher was only a 4-part story. Irrespective of length though, readers simply didn't warm to this new take on Frank Castle. Although this version of the Punisher did reappear the following year in a 4-part crossover with Wolverine, the character would eventually return to his roots in a new Marvel Knights series launched in 2000. This one written by Garth Ennis, with art by Steve Dillon and Jimmy Palmiotti. Nevertheless, this first year of Marvel Knights was a massive success for both Marvel and Event Comics, and as a result, the two companies quickly greenlit even more titles. In 1999, in addition to continuing the 3 other launch books, readers were treated to a 3-issue Black Widow series by Devin Grayson and J.G. Jones, Doctor Strange: The Flight of Bones, a 4-issue limited series by Dan Jolly and Tony Harris, and the aforementioned Wolverine Punisher Revelation. The peak of Marvel Knights output arguably came in 2000. With Marvel Comics beginning to stabilise itself, now 2 years removed from bankruptcy, the company was restructured around new president Bill Jemas. Not only did this result in brand new cutting-edge comics like Ultimate Spider-Man and the subsequent launch of the Ultimate Universe, but it also saw Joe Quesada be promoted to editor-in-chief. Quesada's promotion was undoubtedly a sign of he and Palmiotti's success in overseeing the Marvel Knights imprint, and as he and Jemas worked together to reshape Marvel for a new era, a slew of new Knights comics were announced. In April, Garth Ennis's new Punisher series was released, which swept away many of the supernatural elements added in the previous run and restored Frank Castle to his gritty, realistic roots. This 12-issue series would prove another big success for the brand, resulting in a sequel series being greenlit the following year. In June though, the company unveiled a new monthly ongoing title, named simply Marvel Knights. Designed to be a flagship book for the entire imprint, it was written by Chuck Dixon with art by Ed Barato, and featured a team of heroes all banding together to try and apprehend the Punisher. Then 2 months later in August, the company launched a brand new series called Marvel Boy. This experimental comic, created by Grant Morrison and J.G. Jones, introduced a brand new superhero as its titular character, a Kree named Nova from an alternate reality who finds himself stranded on Earth 616. Adding Grant Morrison to the Marvel Knights roster was a huge moment for the imprint, as they had recently come off a high-profile run on DC's Justice League and were simultaneously working at Marvel on the flagship X-Men comic. Marvel Boy wouldn't be the only original character added to this brand though, as the following month, Paul Jenkins and Jay Lee would unveil their new superhero in The Sentry. In their 5-issue miniseries, The Sentry introduced readers to Robert Reynolds, an unseen superhero from the early years of the Marvel Universe whose memories were lost after a battle with his enemy, the Void. The Sentry's release was coupled with a high-profile publicity stunt, which saw Wizard magazine claim that Marvel had unearthed sketches from a forgotten artist who worked to the company in the early 1960s, and was collaborating with Stan Lee on a character bearing the same name. And then finally, in December of 2000, Brian Michael Bendis and Rob Haynes launched a 3-part series entitled Daredevil Ninja, which detailed Matt Murdock's journey to Japan to aid Stick and the Chased in a war against the Hand. This series would also segue into Bendis taking over the ongoing Daredevil series in early 2001. Overall, by the end of 2000, the Marvel Knights brand was riding tremendously high. Each of its new titles were all well received by fans and critics, and the imprint continued to be one of the cornerstones of Marvel's renewed success. And with Joe Quesada now serving as editor-in-chief of the entire company, it seemed like this ambitious venture was truly here to stay. But while there would be another few years of unprecedented success, by the middle of the decade, the world of Marvel Knights would come tragically crashing down, before fading away with little more than a whimper. By the turn of the millennium, Marvel Knights was riding high with unprecedented levels of success. The year 2000 represented a massive expansion for the imprint, and with Joe Quesada now one of the most influential figures within Marvel Comics, even more titles were announced to this line soon after. In 2001, Grant Morrison followed up their experimental Marvel Boy with a unique take on the company's first family, penning the 4-issue series Fantastic Four 1, 2, 3, 4. Additionally, Jeff Loeb, then best known for his work at DC on The Long Halloween, would team up with longtime collaborator Tim Sale to produce Daredevil Yellow, a heartbreaking love letter to the deceased Karen Page, and a tribute to the early years of the Horned Hero. Told over 6 issues released between June 2001 and January 2002, Daredevil Yellow would become one of the most acclaimed stories in the entire Marvel Knights catalogue. As a result, Loeb and Sale would reteam for several other books for the imprint. In 2002, the duo lamented the loss of Gwen Stacy in the 6-part series Spider-Man Blue, and followed it up the next year with a retelling of Bruce Banner's early years in Hulk Grey. Along with these successes, Marvel Knights expanded into telling bolder, more out-of-continuity stories, with perhaps the most famous being Neil Gaiman and Andy Kubert's Marvel 1602. These exciting new limited series were coupled with a slew of new ongoing titles too. Following the conclusion of Daredevil Ninja, Brian Michael Bendis would take over the brand's flagship title, while Garth Ennis would return Frank Castle to his gritty roots, writing a new monthly Punisher comic that spun out of his 2000 limited series. However, even though many of these titles were huge successes, Marvel Knights would begin a noticeable decline in 2005, with many of the big names that catapulted the imprint to the height of popularity all moving on to more high-profile roles within the company. Joe Quesada announced in November 2005 that all ongoing monthly Marvel Knights books would be fully integrated into the main line of monthly releases, and instead, the Knights imprint would now exclusively be home to limited series and original graphic novels. In the press release that broke this news, Quesada was quoted as saying,
"Marvel Knights is the showcase for evergreen events. Self-contained limited series that think outside the box, that challenge readers to rethink their favorite Marvel characters and reevaluate the legends that surround them. In other words, Marvel Knights will be a place for top talent to work without constraints and deliver the kind of product fans deserve."
As Marvel Knights staples such as Daredevil, Punisher, and Black Panther were all integrated into Marvel's regular line of books, the imprint transitioned into being the home of various short-form limited series, featuring some of the company's biggest characters. In the next 2 years after this change, we got titles featuring the likes of Captain America, Spider-Man, Iron Man, and Wolverine, and even though many of these books were fairly well received, it soon became clear that Marvel Knights was rapidly losing its identity. Marvel Knights did soldier on though for 8 more years, before quietly shutting down in 2013. The final comics released under this name until a 20th anniversary series hit shelves in 2018 were a series of short runs starring Spider-Man, the X-Men, and the Incredible Hulk. I think these are worth highlighting as they demonstrate just how much Marvel Knights had lost its identity by the time it closed its doors. The brand was originally set up to spotlight lesser known and unsung heroes within Marvel's roster, and yet in its final days, the only books it was releasing starred arguably Marvel's 3 biggest properties in the days before the MCU. As such, by the time that Marvel Knights finally concluded at the end of 2013, it became evident to many that its time had come and gone, and readers said a quiet and solemn goodbye to the imprint that had once dared to revolutionise the very nature of superhero comics. Although Marvel Knights has now been out of print for a decade, it still holds a notable place within the history of Marvel Comics. Coming at a time when the company was on its knees, desperate for ways to rebuild itself after its battle with bankruptcy, this calculated risk to hand over a selection of their unsung heroes to 2 ambitious writers paid off better than anyone could have anticipated. The imprint was instrumental in turning Marvel's fortunes around, both in terms of sales and rebuilding its reputation and trust with readers. Marvel Knights was truly a breath of fresh air upon its 1998 debut. The books felt unique, familiar enough to still feel like they existed within Marvel's long-running universe, but in an underground corner yet to be fully discovered. It felt cool, full of hungry and ambitious creators seeking to prove themselves and tell stories unlike anything ever seen before. And an entire generation of readers embraced this, falling in love with these often darker and more challenging stories, and opening their eyes to the broad nature of what superhero comics can be. To quote former Excalibur writer Teenie Howard, who discussed her experience reading Marvel Knights,
"Unlike a lot of Marvel fans and writers, I didn't start reading superhero comics until I graduated high school in the early 2000s. I'd always read and loved comics, but I read a lot of darker indie stuff that was available at the time and had a weird 4-color idea of what superhero comics actually were. But all of the first superhero books I read and loved were Marvel, and Knights was a huge part of that. Marvel Knights was really the beginning of those realistic feeling, darker character study books that have gone on to be the award-winning mainstream. The look, feel, and intent behind Marvel Knights was 100% behind what makes me, and a lot of people I think, a Marvel fan today.
Despite these positive sentiments though, Marvel Knights didn't go on forever. Within a decade of its inception, the imprint had all but faded away, and besides a special anniversary release in 2018, it's become a relic of a bygone era of Marvel Comics. But whilst Marvel Knights' downfall is undoubtedly bittersweet, I think its legacy is identifiable in so many aspects of modern comics today. When Jimmy Palmiotti and Joe Quesada were entrusted to bring this new publishing line to life, they took it as an opportunity and a challenge. The pair wanted to create something that wasn't just new, but felt truly genre-defining. When the first slate of these books came out, nothing else on the rack felt as cutting edge as Marvel Knights. Books like Daredevil, Black Panther, and Inhumans combine the epic storytelling of classic Marvel Comics with the mature and adult stylings of DC's Vertigo imprint, as well as the bold devil-may-care approach seen in rising indie publishers like their very own Event Comics. The result felt like a daring step forward for how comic book storytelling would be approached for the next generation, and in a lot of ways, Marvel Knights would represent a step forward into a brand new era of storytelling. Joe Quesada became editor-in-chief, a post he remained in for 11 years as a result of the imprint's initial success, while writers and artists like Brian Michael Bendis, Garth Ennis, Jay Lee, and Paul Jenkins went on to work on some of the most acclaimed Marvel books of the 2000s. By the time Marvel Knights began its decline in 2006, many of the names who started this imprint were now the driving forces in Marvel's main line of comics, and the books they made reflected how the ethos and spirit of this imprint had spread throughout the company's entire line of publishing. Alongside this, the rise of other publishing imprints, such as the Ultimate Universe, the brainchild of Quesada, Bendis, and Bill Jemas, saw the company take the principle of Knights one step further, allowing its writers and artists to completely reinvent Marvel's roster with a total clean slate in continuity. And with this, Marvel Knights essentially outlived its purpose. However, this ultimately doesn't mean that the story of Marvel Knights is a cautionary tale or something that should be looked back on as unfortunate. Instead, I think the story of Marvel Knights is one of great success, a trailblazing series of comics produced by a group of the industry's rising stars who not only revitalized some of Marvel's then forgotten superheroes, but transformed them into some of the biggest names in all of entertainment. Above all else, the legacy of Marvel Knights can be found in the future success of all of these characters, the creators behind them, and the incredible stories they told in the late 1990s and early 2000s. So next time you go to see these heroes soar on the big screen, I want you to spare a moment to consider the unlikely success of Marvel Knights, and how this aspiring, pioneering imprint forever changed the Marvel Universe and the entire landscape of superheroes. Hey everyone, thank you so much for watching today's video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please make sure to leave a like on this video and leave a comment down below as well. Let me know your thoughts on everything we talked about in today's video. I can't wait to hear what you have to say as always. If you're new to Owen Likes Comics, please make sure to subscribe and turn the notify bell on so you don't miss out on any future videos. And if you enjoyed this and you want some more, there should be some other videos on screen right now that you might also enjoy. If you want to help support the channel and help me make more videos, you can do so over at patreon.com/OwenLikesComics. Or if you just want some more of me, you can follow me on Twitter just at Owen Likes Comics. But that's all for this video. Again, thank you all so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed it, and hopefully I will see you next time. But until then, take care and keep reading.